How you doing?
Good. My name is Sugey Cruz, and I'm here today with Austin Greene. Or do you go by Austin Connor Greene? I'm not really
I
sure.
go Austin Greene. Yeah, Austin
Austin
Greene.
Greene. Cool.
Yeah.
And we're good friends who happen to be actors here in central Pennsylvania. And we're just going to kind of introduce ourselves a little bit and just talk about a couple little things that we have been interested in as actors and as just entertainers and creatives in the area in general.
Yeah.
So, quick, so you know a little bit about me. Um, I'm basically an actress and producer in Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. Do some stuff in New York as well, but willing to travel anywhere for the right thing. I also am a producer for a company called Broken Tile Productions, which I do with two of my friends, Alex Rudiger and Jeremy Good. And Austin and I have actually worked on a number of different projects together. So I want Austin to introduce himself and say like a little bit about what he does.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Austin Greene. I've just kind of been a man of many hats in a lot of ways. I'm a father, massage therapist, uh, wine salesman, actor, comedian, music guy. Do a little bit of everything. I'm trying to figure out which pathway to kind of follow, but luckily people have just kind of been reaching out, and I'm really passionate about one thing at a time, unfortunately. So I'll get really stupidly interested in something, and then it goes out of control. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say. It's one of those things where like I think I just like being around people who are interested in doing things to their best ability, um, and that's why meeting you guys in the actors workshop, I knew pretty much right away. I was like, I want to be in that group of people, just because I could tell that you guys were. It's so rare to find people who are actually serious about doing anything, unless they're paid on the spot to do it. So the ability to stay motivated despite life throwing everything at you to try to you know um, not motivate you. If I can see a group of people collaborating in that way and not getting discouraged too easily, then I'm immediately impressed. But yeah, I that was I had done improv up until that point, and I'd been in other classes and things like that. Um, I had acted. I don't think had I. I had acted at least in one or two short films for the VIDJAM festival, ran by Sam Miller, a great guy out of Harrisburg. Um, and I, I think yeah, that was before the actors workshop. So I'd only done like two films before then, but that was the first time I had been around people who were specifically interested in acting in its own. I'd met theater people, but a lot of them um, would just do theater acting, and they hadn't delved into improv, or they hadn't delved in. I think meeting you guys, you were probably the most versatile people that I'd been in the room with up until that point. So it was really um, it was really cool meeting everybody. And I was intimidated a little bit immediately, because I think it was um, I just saw, because I will joke my way through things that I'm uncomfortable in.
Yeah.
So usually, whenever the jokes subside, that's usually when I'm most comfortable. Like right now, I'm not you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, Jokes will come up if I'm comfortable, but they aren't the main thing. So as soon as I went up to do that audition, I was just like, "Hi!" Like I can't not be a Looney Tunes character whenever I'm
Yeah.
nervous. So
Yeah.
that's actually served me well, though, being nervous, and my naturally I get weird, and people interpret it as funny.
Yeah.
So it's worked out for me sometimes.
Well, that was actually a hint you gave me because I had to play someone who was funny. And I remember you telling me, I reached out to you because like you're like the funniest person I know in real life. So I was like, help me. I'm not funny. And you're like, I've been around you plenty of times when you're funny. It's just like, that's the key is that you have to not be trying to be funny. Like you sort of have to just play the situation and like sort of the situation itself becomes funny because of everything else that's kind of going on around it or whatever. And so, yeah, that was really helpful to me because I think you get into your head that like you need to be a certain thing.
And it's interesting because there was a scene I did, I think it was from The Notebook. I've never seen The Notebook. And I didn't know that that was what the scene was from. So I was like, oh, cool. So I just read the scene.
Did we read that together? Because I like think I read that with like everybody.
Yeah, I think we did that one together. Yeah, and I think it went quite well. I think that was one of my better ones in the class. But it was, I think it really helps to not know that somebody great had already done it, because even though I didn't touch his performance, it didn't even matter to me that I didn't touch it. So that wasn't even on the table.
Right.
And but I remember when I did the Rocky Horror Show in Gettysburg, I did the Rocky Horror Show probably like 4 years ago now. Feels crazy. But I played Riff Raff, and I never saw the Rocky Horror Show. I had a little bit of a memory of what he looked like, but I couldn't. So I just kind of read the lines and gave him a voice that I thought would be fun and matched maybe my past memory from seeing a picture of him.
Yeah.
And when I went in to read the lines, I read the lines that were supposed to be sang because I'd never watched the source material. And the reason I didn't want to watch the source, I didn't want to be influenced by it in any way, at least prior to learning it the way that I wanted to learn it first, and then watching the source material to really pick up the extras. But everybody in the room was laughing because I was talking the sang lines. I can't remember what they were, but I was supposed to be like, I think it's the darkness must flow to the river of right me. That part, I talked that. I just went, the darkness must flow, or whatever, you know. I was just very intense and ridiculous about it. And everyone in the room was laughing at me, and I was like red in the face, like so embarrassed, because I was like, what? They're openly laughing at my performance. But it turned out they were laughing because I just mixed up but afterwards people were telling me how interesting my take was on it. And I think it was just because I didn't even watch the source material.
Yeah.
Oh, so the drummer in my band is moving to Tennessee. So we're going to have to wrap up the album that we've been working on since last, like, is it August? I feel like we jumped into it like August or September, something like that. And, you know, we got really close between like my guitarist and I. We lived together, and then our drummer and the bassist lived together, and the studio is downstairs in their basement. So we've just gotten close enough that like we've really figured out how to create content quickly and efficiently, but also create content that's worth listening to. You know, especially if as a songwriter, especially in the early years, you should be writing enough songs that you're willing to throw away. And then at a certain point, I don't write them anymore. They just come into my head, you know, as you go through the years. So I'll just be walking down the street and a song just comes to my head. I don't know why. But as a group, we've gotten really good at just making songs. And I know the rules of bad songwriting well enough that I just don't do those things anymore. You know what I mean? And I mean, there's no written rules, but there's kind of like unwritten rules, or there's rules. It's like a sociopath, like they create their own rules. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like you create your own rules so that you can break the appropriate rules. I think that's the name of the game in any artistic game that you're playing. And the same thing goes with acting, definitely, and improv and comedy. It's like you want to break rules, because if you're not breaking rules, you're not going to break a boundary ever.
Right.
You'll just
yeah, like you sort of do still need to know what those are so that you know how to do it within a framework that isn't too envelope pushing, because you don't want to like completely rile everybody up. Just enough.
Yeah, just a little bit. It's like children. Children are constantly breaking the rules that you set up. And if they're not breaking your rules, there's actually that's not a good sign necessarily. You know what I mean? You want them to be breaking little things here and there as they're developing and getting older.
Yeah.
Because that shows that they have initiative in a way. It's not a bad quality to have if they're breaking little rules here and there, so long as they're not completely trying to destroy the foundation of your life.
So yeah, so definitely I'm excited for your stand-up stuff. I actually got to go to one of your, before COVID, before COVID kind of put a wrench in everybody's plans, I went to one of your first stand-up things.
I think it was the last open mic that happened before COVID, because I'm pretty sure it was like the next day that everybody
Well, I
shut
went
down.
to your first one. I went to your
Oh,
very,
you went
very
to the
first
first
one,
one.
and then
That's right.
you had a second one that I couldn't make it out to.
Right, and I appreciated seeing you guys there so much. I was happy that you were like, it was fun just having, hanging out with you guys and talking with Hal and Tony and I really, that night when I saw you guys come in, the one of the top things in my mind is I can't let them leave without having a good conversation. You know what I mean? Because you guys came so far out of your way. We had some talented people that night. I was really proud of that. That was the very first open mic event that I ever hosted, and like I told you, I didn't do stand up there per se. I was really just hosting and welcome. I really wanted to make it about the comics there, because I do stand up. I'll go out to Frederick, Maryland. I'll go to Harrisburg, and I've traveled around doing it a decent amount. Lancaster has a good stand up club. The Chameleon Club does stand up there as well. But yeah, I think the thing about stand up that I like so much is that, again, I love games based on their rules and how I can break them, and um, I don't tend to try to be. I try not to go over the line too often in anything that I do, but I like touching that line, and stand up is the perfect place for that type of thing. Um, and I have complete creative control, and if the show bombs, it's my fault, and I like that responsibility. I don't like. It's always sad whenever you have five talented people, and for whatever reason, it just something that you're all doing together just doesn't take off, and it seems like sometimes it was just a bad day, because that's just what it is sometimes. But nobody can play the blame game when you're the only one in the game, and I like that feeling where you don't even entertain the idea that it could be somebody else's fault, because immediately it's yours. Or sometimes people will blame the audience, although and that's true. Like, some great comedians could have a bad crowd, and that's definitely the case. But a lot of times, if you really know what you're doing, you can crack up even the stingiest of crowds. I love acting because I like the camaraderie and the team building exercise of it, and then the finished product and how we all envision it being, and then how it turns out. And like, oh, I can't wait to see that footage. Like, I like the excitement of waiting to see the footage. Um, Although I'm so hard on myself that seeing the footage is really, it can be a bit rough sometimes. So um, I really like that with stand up, I see the footage every time I do it, because I film it myself, and then I go home, and it's much easier for me to carve it in
Right.
that way. So
Yeah. Speaking of your music, I know one of your other current projects that you're doing is you're gonna be hopefully releasing your first album and also your first music video, which hopefully we'll be able to help you out with. And
yeah,
yeah, do you want to
yeah,
chat a little bit about that?
yeah. I'm really hoping I can get Jeremy and Alex on board for that. That'd be amazing, and you as well. The music video is going to be, we're working on with Chris Rupert and Erebus, and they're very talented. So I have things to look forward to with that, and it's great. And I love that I don't have to write my own script for it. And really, anytime that I only have to do my part in it, and my tiny part is tiny, I'm excited about. I'm like, all I got to do is learn the lines, and not, because so many times, really, if you want to get projects going, there tends to be one person who does like 90% of the work on a lot of projects, and then other people fill in the blanks. You know what I mean? And I love being the person who fills in the blank. Um, with the music project, I've been sharing. I mean, I used to write songs all by myself, so I had 100% responsibility over that, and I like that the same way I like the stand-up comedy, where it's all on me. But it's a much easier thing than having a multi-dimensional project where you have to take up so many facets of it, like being a producer, director, actor, people like Ben Stiller having so many roles in his own production, and also being a writer. That just that's a panic attack for me. So to have other people be interested in my projects enough to flesh them out is really exciting, and we're hoping to have the album out by like June, July. I think our next album, which we're already planning, I already have like me and my guitarist, Jeff Colby, we've already carved out like 28 songs to choose from
Oh, cool.
for the next album. So I'm really, by the time I'm done with this album, I really just want to get on the next one. And yeah, I like to get into a rhythm where I can create without the feelings and emotions getting in the way. And whenever you're in the early years of developing your craft, it's really hard to not just let the emotions get in the way. And even later on, but with the music thing, I've been doing it long enough where my emotions don't matter to me anymore about it. And that's a really nice place to be, because it's, my emotions are irrelevant kind of with it. And it's not stoicism, it's just the realization that my heart will lie to me when it comes to my art. I love the acting and the comedy and the music for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I can't wait till they kind of bleed into each other. But I suppose that'll be many years from now before it really finds its foundation together. But I love it all. It's great.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can survive off of doing it one day.
You're discovering different parts of yourself with each one. So like that'll be cool. You know, there'll come a day where hopefully they all kind of are like, oh, that's what that's all about, and like they'll merge in some way.
Right. Yeah, I would love to have philosophical enlightenment in that particular realm before I lose my hair. That's really my goal. Like if I could do all of this before my hair goes.
Lose your hair? Is that like a distinct possibility?
I don't know. It's my jeans aren't looking too hot right now. Although it's fairly thick. You know, I don't think my ancestors do not have bad bald looks, but I'd like to keep it. I was just watching a Simpsons episode where Homer he started using basically Rogaine.
Yeah.
And he like grew all of it back, and like he got like promoted at his job, and like all these things started happening. But people just take you more seriously with hair. I realized that. You know?
Well, definitely one of the things I wanted to chat with you about is a book that you recommended to me as an actor, which is The Power of the Actor.
Yes. I brought my copy as well.
Yes. And the nice thing is this is actually written by IVANNA, and I'm hopefully not going to butcher her last name, CHUBBUCK.
CHUBBUCK. If you speak it into Google, it comes up anyway, no matter how you mispronounce it. I was going to say mispronunciate it. No matter how you mispronunciate it, it comes up on Google. I think it's CHUBBUCK.
CHUBBUCK. Okay.
I think that's the way to say it. Yeah.
But the nice thing is that she gives so many examples from that to, like, you know, Jim Carrey, Brad Pitt, you know, Charlize Theron, and some of these like Oscar, you know.
Sylvester Stallone, I believe, was one of her.
Yeah, there's I'm trying to think of there's just so many stories, and even TV actors and stuff like that, like Eric LaSalle and that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
cool, because I've seen so many of those performances to like. And I could remember some of those scenes that she was talking about, that it was cool to like be able to kind of visualize like, oh, okay, I do kind of remember what they did in that scene. And like, I just remember it being good. I didn't know that all these steps were things that they did to like actually like enhance their performance, I guess.
Right. Well, there was a point where I was like, how delusional do I have to be to actually believe in some of these roles? And I realized you don't have to be, based on the fact that I'm a delusional person in general, more so than most people, I think. And I have a harder time accessing this subconscious place that people go to whenever they're acting than some people who are much more right-minded than me. So I had realized, I was like, well, it looks like the delusion that I could play upon, you'd assume from my, sometimes my lack of ability to be present. You think that would really help, and I think it will as I mature through my process. But sometimes I see people who are just so skilled that it definitely seems to be a skill to delve into that world of believing in the part that you're playing and then turning that on and off.
Yeah.
And, as I was going through this book, we had decided to talk about two main things, but it really is in its full capacity. It's a 12-step program that she had mapped out, and I had written down all the steps at one point, and I'd given them little symbols, and I'd put them throughout my script.
Yeah.
To remind me to do them for each line. I really went really deep with this stuff, with really not super sophisticated results, but that's kind of part of it, you know what I mean? I think every natural actor does everything in this 12-step program subconsciously every once in a while, and they accidentally deliver a really true, compelling performance. Um, but they don't have control of it, you know, and I think the 12-step program definitely helps to get you to figure out what it is that you were doing right on those days when you did right. And I think the more educated you are on the steps and the the application of them, um, the better you educate and get that into your soul, then you should immediately try to forget everything that you've learned and just be in it. And that's the hard part, is taking what you've learned and then not thinking about what you learned at all.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's actually step number 12, which is letting it go. Is like
yeah,
believe you did your homework enough
yeah,
on characters and on what you're supposed to be bringing to it, and that you know your overall objective and your scene objective so well that like, okay, like it's just second nature now. Like I'm
yeah,
letting it go, and I'm letting myself take, letting all that homework I did take over, and
right.
like living in that moment kind of thing, and living in that skin.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get back into acting in the next opportunity I get, just because I've let go of acting so much in the last couple months, because I just, out of necessity, I haven't had access to. I mean, I could if I really tried, set up exercises. I was doing exercises at home by myself, acting scenes out, you know, when I was taking classes a lot, and really just hammering. For the last 2 years, I've just been hammering all of these classes and skills into my body. And right now I'm in a period, the reason I'm kind of aiming more towards comedy and music is because I want to forget everything that I was learning there and just have faith that it's in my body now a little bit. So that way, when I go back to re-educate myself, I can inch a little bit more of it into my soul and then back off, and do that waning process. I think helps, based on the other skills that I've built up over time in this particular, in entertainment uh, ventures in general. But I can't wait to act in something, just to see, because I don't care so much right now, and that's kind of where you got to be. But I cared so much for about 2 years, really hard, kind of blood, sweat, and tearsing it. And right now I'm like, cool, let's have fun. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, where you got to be in order to create something meaningful. Heath Ledger, I think he was the first one that made me really want to be an actor. I mean, I've always wanted to be a comedic actor, but he was the first one that made me want to be a serious actor in any capacity. Um,
You're so
but you know, growing up, I loved like Jim Carrey, and I just wanted to be Jim Carrey so bad. I wanted to be like Mr. Bean and Jim Carrey. Like I just wanted to be a very physical comedic actor. So I would memorize those movies like back and forth, and go around and recite them and embarrass my brother, and do everything I could to just be ridiculous in that way. So love of comedy definitely came first, but I think in 2007 when I saw The Dark Knight and Heath Ledger's performance, that was just so mind-boggling to me that I'd never been compelled so much by an actor, and compelled to just be that level of great in some way. Like, how could I be that great? It doesn't have to be in acting. It doesn't have to be this or that. Just how do I become that great at anything?
yeah.
I think Heath Ledger, what made me feel like my goals were realistic insofar as pursuing greatness in an artistic um, world, was seeing movies like 10 Things I Hate About You and not being super impressed by his performance in that.
Yeah.
And then seeing how he got from this to this.
Yeah.
And it was the idea that it was like, it's possible to go from being a good actor to just that, or just a guy who was good enough to be in a movie to that. And I see the same thing in stand-up comedians. There's a number of stand-up comedians that I have their CDs that I listen to in my car that were awful comedians. Maybe they were great at certain things that got them through, but
Yeah.
I'm like, who let you make this CD? You know? And then they became the best comedians who've ever lived.
Yeah.
But it's either way, if I'm cringing during a performance of somebody that I love, you
Yeah.
know what I
Exactly.
mean? But if you look at anybody who's great, there's cringy performances.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I saw
so
some of Brad Pitt stuff when he first came out, and because he wasn't quite famous yet, it was like when he was like getting a little famous, all of
yeah,
a sudden on like Showtime and HBO and stuff like that, they started showing some of his older stuff just because it's like, oh, let's see if like it does better now that like
yeah,
people kind of sort of know who he is. Um,
right,
and it was so crazy to see. And honestly, even in some of the stuff that like I'll admit I watched because he was pretty to look at,
yeah,
like, and they're good movies, but I wouldn't say that he was the best in them. So like Legends of the Fall or Interview with the Vampire, like he was definitely like on my wall, but not for the right reasons per se. I think what really, when he made that switch, he did it in a couple of movies here and there. Like there's a movie called California that he was really good in, that was dark. But that wasn't very well seen. It was kind of more indie-ish. Fight Club was when he really flipped that switch, and I started to respect him. It's gonna sound awful, not for his physical appearance so much as
no,
for what he brought to a role, and like 'cause he was
right,
so good in that, and so um. Oh wait, sorry. There was one beforehand that I thought was 12 Monkeys.
right,
12
yeah,
Monkeys was on there. So anytime he sort of like deviated, and there's actually been articles about this written about him where he sort of is an enigma even to the Hollywood world, because like it's a person that's supposed to be a leading man, like he has the leading man face, but likes to play character actors.
good looking guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but if you see him really in his element, oh my God, that Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Yeah, he's so
so
good.
funny in that, but you don't think of Brad Pitt as funny.
Yeah. Even though
Funny
he's
guy.
shown us like time and time again that he can be. And I mean, I love it when someone that is thought of in one way flips a switch. So like even when Jim Carrey or Neil Patrick Harris or somebody like
Yeah,
that thought of as more funny
yeah,
flips the switch a little bit and is then dramatic. Or even which is a movie that sadly I haven't been able to see since he passed. But Robin Williams in like What Dreams May Come. Like when
I've never seen it.
oh, you have to watch it.
Yeah,
It touches on suicide, so that's why like it was used to be one of my favorite movies pre him doing
yeah,
that. So, like it's so hard for me to watch it now. That's an amazing movie, but like whenever you see somebody do something that's so outside their element or seems to be so outside their element, and they're just so good at it, and you're
yeah,
just like, wow, like that's inspirational. Like that's something that I
yeah,
want to be able to do.
yeah. And the funny thing is, I've never done a funny role. Like I've never done a humorous role, but that's why I got into acting. Primarily was I was like, I want to do like comedy, but I realized pretty quickly that I was like, if I can't learn how to be a good actor in general, then anything that I do comedy wise isn't going to matter
Yeah.
anyway. It surprises you. You don't know why you're funny. I think building that self-awareness as to why people respond physiologically to what it is that you're expressing on camera
Mm-hmm.
is the key to being, getting to that point where you kind of flip the switch. It's like that self-awareness of, you know, a lot of times we're doing things to be truthful, and that's what you should be doing as an actor. So about what the directors and the writers are responsible for the message. And as an actor, if you go in with an agenda, I feel like that's like the dirtiest thing. That's a way to quickly uh, it's a good way to sabotage your own legitimacy within the performance.
Yeah.
And I'm not doubting that really talented actors could do it well, um, but it's not the preferred. It's not a suggested technique.
Yeah. So we got to work together in a project called Meridian for
Yeah,
Bad Movie Night, and which you mentioned before, because they're going to be helping you out with your music video.
yeah,
Love those guys in
yeah,
general. One of the things when you're trying to torture me If you guys haven't seen it yet, you have to look up Meridian.
We'll
Look
put up
up
a link. We'll put up a link.
Yeah, like go search on YouTube "Bad Movie Night" and look up Meridian, and it's a good flick. But you're trying to torture me, and you start playing with like this little stick of fire and like blowing it and all sorts of.
Yeah.
So in the chapter that she has entitled "Tools," it was funny because like there weren't like we were in the middle of the woods in somebody's backyard somewhere in a freezing night in October, and like there really wasn't that much around us to really utilize, you know, space wise. And so like it was just cool to see you pick the one thing that you did and like being able to use it to become more menacing and to like get more into your brain. And I don't know if that was like in your thoughts at all when you did it, or if it was just so ingrained in you naturally to just use your space as much as possible. But literally, like when I was like reading that chapter, like that was like one of the first things that came into my head was like I remembered you doing that, and I was like, oh, like that was so cool. Like, and I've told you this before that was like definitely. So we've worked together now on Secret Within the Sphere.
Yeah.
We worked.
Loose ends.
We were on the same film, Loose Ends, but we didn't get a chance to work together on that one.
No.
You were great in it.
Thank you.
But yeah, we didn't get to actually share scenes. I was on set a couple times when you were on there, but we didn't get to work together. And then obviously Meridian, we got to work together quite intimately, obviously, since like we played boyfriend and girlfriend and like got to do the whole thing basically together. So it was just cool to see. Well, it was a role that more dependent on you to carry it anyway, but so obviously it's going to be where you see more of a change in a person anyway. But like it was cool to see, just like seeing you in acting class, seeing you in all these other different roles, like where like I could tell that you'd been working so hard.
Well, I was like really studying night and day, just racking my brain for a while, and I think it's like it seems like a switch. I think, you know, with Brad Pitt, where you're like, there's a switch, and I think from the outside it could really seem like that, but I think it's these tiny little things over time. And you know, the worst part about it sometimes is that you don't recognize it within yourself in any way. But I will say that through Meridian, I think that was the easiest thing I've ever acted in, which is good. You know what I mean? It was hard, you know, physically, the cold and stuff like that, but it was the easiest. It was the easiest time for me, I think, just because I had collected all these tidbits of wisdom from people around me.
Yeah.
And I'd started to embody them a little bit finally. And I've never had a chance to be that much in a film. I've been side characters for everything, pretty much. So I had a little bit more to work with, and generally I had always been working with 1 lines or 2 lines or 3 lines, and in that, you know, I was, you know, we were both main characters, so it was us driven. So so I actually had something that I could take all of the stuff that I had learned and put it into. And I was becoming pretty lazy around that time, so I think it was one of those times where I finally was too lazy to overthink it.
Realizing we actually have done 4 because you were also in my film.
I was
16. I was just like, wait a minute. I was like, wait a minute, you were in something else with me. So yeah.
Well, I like those Stanley cameos. I like those cameos, you know. No, even you know, with Broken Tile stuff, I was like, even if I can't be in it, I just like the idea that I'm like a poster in the background with my face in it or something. You know what I mean? Just like little cameos. I like those.
We definitely like to do a lot of Easter eggs in our stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's something to like always look at in the works that we do. Even honestly, like the little things that Alex has been doing with like the little caricatures and stuff like that. Like any Broken Tile, like if you actually look at the animation, it has like SC is me.
Oh yeah.
And there's like, so like he has our initials on the train. And then when you're going through the train, like our characters from Dirt are in one of the cars.
Oh, cool.
And then him as Richie is in the last cart. There's like a sign on it that says like Rude was here.
Yeah.
So like it's like written kind of like as like graffiti on the train.
Yeah, I like his little animation style.
Yeah, for sure. Like I mean, he was an artist first, so it's kind of like what you were talking about with you, where like you have all these like competing kind of interests and loves, kind of,
Yeah,
trying to see like which one wins out. And I think it's just like brilliant to watch it. It doesn't necessarily have to be that any of them really win out. Like it's, whatever you feel inspired or called to do at that particular time, it's okay to like give into that a little bit more.
you
So,
know, whenever I was on set with you doing Meridian, I was writing a song that day. Throughout the day, I was writing lyrics. I would just add a lyric here or there. And when I'm walking down the street, if I'm walking to the grocery store and I have a joke in mind, I'll just write it down on my phone. And I won't try to perfect it. I'll just write it in pieces, and then I'll go back to it later and try to edit it if I feel so inclined. And I have all these things separated in little lists now. Now that I got this new phone, so like just organizing your ability to take your ideas, even if they're not good, and just put them somewhere, makes it a lot easier to throw out the trash that doesn't work and then highlight the stuff that's good. And it's really enabled me to be creative in a lot more ways. I wish I had a better way to say it. It's allowed me to be creative in a lot of ways simultaneously while doing something that should be at the top of my mind. And I think kind of having, when I was in school, what they would call ADHD has really been my best quality in that if you just give into it and then look at it as a personality type instead of a disorder,
yeah.
and you look at those things instead of as negatives, you look at the positive sides of them. It's like, well, I can't think linearly, but I can think exponentially in a bunch of different ways, but not linearly. So that's a problem if you're trying to write a script. But it's great if you want to write the punchline to something that just needs a premise, or if you need, and then if you learn how to organize all of those things, you can come back to them when you have a really good idea for them. And I've become aware of my position in relation to people. I have to find people who are good, who that think linearly. And I think you're a good example of somebody who is capable of thinking linearly and making your lists and studying and being diligent in that way. And I think you've probably realized that you try to reach out to people who think sporadically, and to combine those talents. And not that I'm incapable of thinking linearly or that you're incapable of thinking spontaneously, but just that that's where we naturally
Fit.
um,
Well, it's funny
fit.
because you mentioned ADHD, and like that's something I have as well, but like people don't assume that. Um,
Right. Yeah.
but I think it's just learning, like, so it was like beaten out of me like at a young age in terms of like, like you have to get like, this is why, so like you get taught a lot of like techniques to try
Yeah.
to, create routines and try to think linearly and try to like really like, okay, how do I focus, and forcing your brain to kind of do
Yeah.
that. So it's interesting that like while you're trying to learn, like you do think more sporadically and like you're trying to hone it in now, sometimes when you need to, that at the same time, I'm like, I have the same kind of condition and I'm been taught to do that so much that I'm trying to actually free my brain and I'm trying to remember what it was like to be more spontaneous and not filter things out as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
It actually sometimes happens with it's something I've talked a little bit about with Tony Marion, who directed us in Loose Ends and stuff like that. And I'm working with him on a number of different projects right now as a producer, because where that hyper focused linear stuff comes into play would be like in some of the production work that I have to do. But one of the things that I was mentioning is that when I'm writing, it's so hard to take off that producer hat. And part
Yeah.
of that isn't just the producer hat, it's just that because I reined in so much of my ADHD, that it's hard for me not to start already while writing, think about like, oh wait, that's another location. Could you afford that? Like that's
Right.
another, you know, item that we may or may not have access to? Is that going to be expensive if we have to get it for ourselves, or is it going to be something that we can, you know, somebody will be able to donate it and like it would be okay?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's hard not to think in a producer mindset while kind of writing and things like that. And two good pieces of advice that I got. One was from Tony, which was, you know what, when I'm writing, like, he's like, it's not a bad skill to have. He's like, when I'm writing and I know that it's something that I'm going to end up having to produce and figure out how to fund, I totally edit the heck out of that, because I know I don't have access to millions of dollars. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. He's like, you know, it saves you time in the long run. The other good piece of advice was from Alex, which was just like, just write it. And then you can edit it in your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh draft based on, you know, but don't let it kind of take over while you're writing. Then you'll never write anything, which is what the problem that I was having, is that I wasn't writing anything because I would censure myself so much because of thinking that way. So it has its pluses and its minuses for sure. So I'm definitely, it's funny that all of my sporadic ADHD friends are trying to like do this, and I'm like
trying to do this
and going like trying to do this.
No, and there's definitely a balance. I mean, I it's interesting because Alex is this, he's so similar to me, and he's also the opposite of me in a lot of ways, where he's very, very conscientious. I think he's very industrial minded. He's very very much the carpenter mindset, where he'll be like, oh, well, I don't care what these slabs of wood are made out of, but I'm going to put them together.
Right.
And I think he's very much, he's good at the foundational work and building a structure. And then, you know, I think what he's learning as he's growing in his process is he's learning how to fill in the rest of the building. You know, he's learning how to apply the drywall to his foundation and his skeleton. And I think I'm kind of the opposite in that, is I'm not good at building a foundation or a structure. I'm not good in that way, but I'm good at kind of painting the walls. So you know what I mean? So I think we're very similar in that, you know, we're different in that the way that we would work would be pretty much the opposite, where I think he would just bust it out every day, and I would just show up and just be like, I guess I'm painting this wall. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we're the same in that we're both working in the same house. It's kind of like we have complementary talents, I think, maybe. The things that I'm interested in, or the things that I naturally have a proclivity to add, are kind of the opposite of the things that he naturally has the proclivity to add. I would never finish a movie. I would never write a script, really. I've tried. Like, I've written plenty of things, but I would never write a script. I've written ideas and kind of a breakdown where I have the idea in my head. But once I have that idea in my head, it's so fleshed out in my head that I'm like, cool, I already thought it. I never have to do that now.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing, I would get so bored trying to write it out. But if you hear me spiel about everything, and I had a good writer who just wrote everything that I said, then I, you know what I mean? But my attention span is so short that it pains me. It's like physical pain for me to rethink about that idea.
Yeah.
And but he would be very much like, all right, let's do 6 drafts and just see how much better we can get each time.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm a little bit sometimes more jealous of. I'd say for sure the 3 of you, like you, Alex, and Jeremy, in the sense that like I am so much more cautious about what I put out sometimes, that I like the concept of just like, and we've tried it a couple of times, like we'll do we definitely want you to come in at some point and like do like a little improv-y thing with us in general, but like we'll like Alex will have like this idea of like, we're all together, like let's just quick throw together like an improv scene, and I'm just like, and like you can immediately see like the differences in our personality, because he's like all gung-ho and has props and stuff and like is like ready to go with an accent. Jeremy's like, all right, whatever, and I'm like,
You know what's great about that? If you guys started taking improv, if you guys just took a 6-week improv class, though, you would walk away with so much more confidence in it that
Yeah.
whenever see, that's the thing. I wish I had his ability to do, to just be like, hell, let's go for it. Let's take some awesome photography today and like make a cool video out of it.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I'll think about stuff like that and then think about something else 2 minutes later. I don't, but I like being around people like that because they force you out of your comfort zone in that way. And, I think, yeah, definitely. I think we should all, like all 3 of us, 4 of us, Jeremy included, let's all just take like a 6-week improv class. We would, in that, you'd have a professional teaching all of us the basics, and then we could move on and really learn technical skills that we could play together.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of coming up with ideas. And there's the good thing about improv is it forces you second to second to come up with an additional brick to add to the building of the scene. And it doesn't matter if the brick is brilliant. It matters that the brick is consistent with the rest of the building, Yeah. So, it's about keeping continuity really, and staying realistic within the context of the scene, even if the scene is completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really, I think we should really get together and plan to do an improv class together. All of these qualities, if you put them together into one person, that's what kind of makes those legends, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But really, we should just take all of each other. We should just huddle in together to
Exactly.
you know what I mean?
You're good at this. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And then, we'll all adopt each other's qualities as we go along. Sometimes it's you don't do something just because you've never seen anybody else do it right in front of you.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely well, I want to definitely touch base on the last thing here real quick, which is some other tools and resources that you were, and we've alluded to them throughout the whole obviously combo, but like what are some like definite like resources that you think that other stand-up comedians or actors or musicians can take advantage of in our area?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of things. I have the Comedy Improvisation Manual. This is UCB.
Okay.
UCB is basically, it's the closest thing to like an improv textbook that people often refer to. But yeah, UCB, Comedy Improvisation Manual. It's great. It's like a textbook. Like it's hilarious. It's funny. It's got illustrations, and it really teaches you basically how to do what's called the Herald, which is something I haven't talked about in a long time. So I'm not going to stick my foot in the mouth. But it's just talking about long form improv, and specifically long form. There's short form improv, but I would say you should get really good at long form before you delve into short form, because it can be pretty cringy if you haven't really developed your long form skills before delving into whose line is it anyway style improv, because you could take the principles you learned long form and then you have to cut them in half and then do them faster, and it's really it's a lot of fun, and it's cool to watch whenever you see people who are good at doing it do it.
Yeah.
The reason I think sometimes improv gets a stigma is because sometimes you see shows where people are just learning, and it can be really difficult to watch if people aren't vibing together. If maybe, you can tell if there's negative energy between two people on stage really easily, versus having a script that forces you to, you know what I mean? People's essences are forced out by improv in a way, which is what people in film acting are really looking for. I think that's what people are lacking oftentimes, is figuring out how to derive that essence. So how to be the greatest improviser on earth, that's another good one. Will Hines, he's great. An actor's life. If you want to be an actor and know what it's like behind the scenes and just how to basically slum it, and this book is great. It kind of walks through her journey. It's called a survival guide. So it was basically her journey getting to the point where she was on The Office, and it was just about how to deal with rejection, how to do things that you never see in acting books. Acting books generally are about how to be a better actor. But this book is not necessarily about how to be a better actor, although she has little things here and there. It's about how to deal with if you had a scene where you were dealing with somebody that you don't like in real life, or if you had a scene with things like that, practical advice versus philosophical or, advice for creatives. And then my favorite acting book, personally, is Uta Hagen's Respect for Acting, which, if you've never read it, she's just...
I love her name.
It's great. You know what I mean? But I think she's probably it's the easiest acting book I've read so far. If you're reading Stanislavski, it just bores me sometimes. But her books are just really digestible, really easy to break down. I made a handout whenever I was in my acting class with Katie that I handed out at least digital copies of. I basically rewrote her chapters and broke them down into like how to. I have it in my folder. I'll show you.
Cool.
This is the homework that I was creating for myself whenever I was in acting class all the time, because, I just wanted to be as good as I could. But I'm sure I can find it. I made an audition checklist for myself, like everything that I should think about prior to going in for an audition, and then having, what the moment before a scene, what was my character thinking, what were they doing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I created all of these checklists and things that you do for an audition, blah, 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 my notes, scripts, and I know it's down here, I'm sorry. I made a template for if I ever had a character, I would basically write down everything about the character. I did a lot of homework. The point is, I did a lot of homework. It was good having the conversations, because it's funny which things you forgot to talk about the night before, because you don't realize until you're on the set. You never know until you understand. It's kind of like Mike Tyson had that quote where he's like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yep.
I always feel like that whenever I'm on a set, right away, where I'm like, okay, how am I going to make use of this area?
Right.
Which places would I stand in relation to that camera? And Chris Rupert, I love his flexibility and how nonchalant he is about just being like, okay, like the amount of ideas that he took from us, that he allowed us, the amount of ideas that he allowed us to flesh out because we had brought them up. You don't get that usually with people.
Well, I think it was totally too. He it's funny because he's done a ton of films, but he mostly does it with Ian, and it's like the two of them do everything in the film. So he said this was the first time that he'd ever worked with like quote unquote actors, and that this was like our main thing is like we didn't come there to direct it, we didn't come there to produce it, we didn't come there with like sound or anything else in mind. Like we just came to like, all right, this is my part, which there is a certain freedom and love that I have for that. I love kind of I love doing all the pain in the ass stuff, like the producing stuff, but there's days that I love just being able to be like, you know what, I just came and I'm here, you tell me what you want me to do, and like I'll just happily do that when I need to. And so I think part of the reason he gave us that level of respect was it was his first time working with people that clearly had a relationship already pre-existing, being there, and then also so like we knew how to work with each other, and then that like we knew enough about, like we knew our lines, we knew what was expected of us, so like there was like a certain freedom to being like, sure, like let's see how that turns out, like I'm excited to see what you guys come up with too. So
right, yeah. And there was a certain, I think when it came to the script, one of the things I learned just from all of the acting experience I had done prior and all the classes was it's not so important what the line is as much as it is understanding what the line means. And I used to put a lot of emphasis on memorizing the line. But I think in Meridian, that was one of the first times where I really finally felt like I physically understood that. And we didn't memorize the lines sometimes until the moment before. But that gave the lines that spontaneity that they would have naturally. but I understood what all the lines meant days before.
Right.
And I made sure to understand what the lines meant, which sometimes it's weird how you think that you're understanding what lines mean, but you don't grasp it. You're just memorizing the words. And yeah, and it was funny because I remember that day we kept crunching lines like right before the scene, which I think for both of us is uncommon generally.
Yeah.
Um,
We also decided that day that we were going to do the whole thing in one day for the most part, except for like my few scenes that could be shot the next day. Because you were so committed to the stuff that you were doing in Maryland
right.
that
Yeah.
like when you realized like, oh wait, like you mean like I wouldn't get back till like 9 o'clock at night to Lancaster to try to shoot this again. And you're like, okay, can we do all of this in one night? And so like I think that was part of it too, is that there were some parts that we had planned that we were doing the next day that were like, okay, nope, we're just
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's
powering
funny.
through
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
it was just
But I like that spontaneity, especially when the lines aren't incredibly difficult. And I was surprised how many times I thought we were going to mess our lines up and have it screw up a scene, but it didn't happen. And I was really surprised about that because I think me taking the time to find the line
Mhm.
created the realism of somebody looking for the things that they were, I wasn't looking for the line. I was in the scene and the line came to me as a result of responding to the environment.
Right.
And that's really what you want to be doing. But sometimes rigidly knowing the lines so well without an understanding of the lines isn't any better than not knowing the lines at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, although I think you should know your lines to the point where they are coming out of you,
Yeah.
um, I think that day really taught me that specifically is that like it's better to know the meaning than it is to know the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you forget
And
that sometimes.
yeah, and I think that that's definitely, if anything, that I wish I had read this book before we did that would change a little bit differently. I'm not entirely sure how. When one of the things, again, being sort of the pain in the ass over analytical person that I am, that I'm trying to do is going back and being like, okay, well, like here I'm looking at my performance again, and like, which is the Samuel L. Jackson approach. He said, "How are you going to get better if you don't watch yourself?" And it's like, because I hate
Luckily, I'm vain, so I can't help but watch myself.
watch yourself. Yeah, no. But one of the things I'm trying to do is going back and thinking about these moments and like what could I have done differently for a specific role that would have enhanced it. And so I think for Meridian, one of the things that I don't think any of us had really thought about, and then was a little bit freeing because Chris admitted that he wrote the chemistry as a little bit different anyway, because he originally intended it to be two brothers, and then changed it to a female, and that changed it, the dynamic, to boyfriend and girlfriend. So it wasn't intentional that it had to have a certain dynamic. But I think one of the things that I had wished I had done was maybe have an overall objective of what I wanted to get out of your character, I guess. So like thinking about like, what is the thing that I'm trying to get from Ethan? Like, what is it that like, so I think I was definitely thinking from scene to scene about scene objectives, but I don't know that I necessarily was overall trying to come up with like this thing that I wanted out of your character that like was this overarching thing. So I think if anything, I would go back and maybe like, is there something that Sarah wants from Ethan? And like, what is that something? And like, how is it that informs every scene that we do together, kind of thing?
Well, it was funny because I remember on the set, that was one thing I felt a little guilty about, was that I had turned you into a nag into the in my overall, and it ended up kind of falling into my overall and my scene objectives. But like I feel like I'm being nagged at. That wasn't per se what I had written down or thought of, but subconsciously that's kind of what came out, was like my responses were of that of a person feeling as though they're being nagged at by their partner.
Yeah.
And it was funny at one point, you're like, do I have to be a nag? Like, it was funny how you picked up on that, whether I realized that or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Based off of my overall objective that I had created, that it was based strictly off of the lines.
Yeah.
Um, I think what prompted it that way for me was just naturally that would show more of a relationship
Yeah.
than us being like, you know.
And I think that that's
So,
more truthful too, because it's probably like, did the, maybe the moment before was like, we genuinely showed up to do a hike together to like get closer together and blah, blah, blah. And then like after 6 hours of being stuck in the woods, going around in a circle and like you with your stupid little device, like, like maybe we have been dating for 2 years now and it's just like, okay, this is no longer cute. Like, this is freaking annoying. Like, I'm annoyed at you because
we're close enough for me to tell you how much I hate the woods. No, and that's the funny thing is, that I don't, it wasn't intentional, but I think naturally my mind went to the fact, like, who can't relate to a bickering couple? You know what I mean? Like, who can't relate to that? And also, for people who've never been in a relationship, it makes them feel better because they're like, at least I'm not arguing with nobody, you know? So, but yeah, but that was funny because after that, I remember rethinking. That was one thing I learned, uh, from all the books that I've been reading was, after you're done filming whatever it is you're filming, and you watch your performance, and obviously there's certain things that are glaring that you're like, I'm not making that facial expression anymore. I'm not doing that crazy of a head movement because that's not what people do. You know what I mean? Once you get past things like that, you take on deeper, how would I approach this if I had to do it differently? If I couldn't do the scene the same way? And I thought about that afterwards, and I really imagined the script in a different way. And I thought, how much more powerful could it have been if I did it this way or that way? I'm really happy with the product. I'm really happy with how it turned out. But had it turned out like that one line where it was like, where I'm kind of walking out, and you're like, and you say a line to me, and I say, okay,
yeah.
um, and I say it kind of like, all right, I'm not a child, you know what I mean? That was kind of
Yeah.
the feeling behind it. But if I said it kind of scoffingly, like, you're silly, like, would that have been equivocally um, interesting to watch on camera? Maybe, But I thought about that afterwards. Whenever you're like, why do I have to be so naggy in this, or something? I can't remember what you said, but it was funny.
Yeah, well, and it was funny because for that particular scene, it's funny that like I remember I got transported right back to it, so I know exactly what I like said to you right beforehand. It was just like, it's gonna get dark soon, like just hurry up, basically.
Yeah. Because that could have been a loving line. They could have been like, all right, well, it's gonna get dark soon. We're hurry back,
And
I'd be like, whatever,
And it was funny because like that's actually kind of, as much as I had been naggy and like irritated to that point, that was the one time, like facially anyway, that I tried to portray, hey, like more concern, I guess, like like not just concern for you, that like I don't want you to be out, so while it's so dark in like the middle of the woods, but like also concern for me of like, well, you're gonna leave me by myself.
Yeah.
Like,
And I can remember now. So what I was thinking at that time, because we had already had our little bickering thing kind of over by that tree stump, you know what I mean? Like in the beginning.
yeah.
It only made sense that like if all of a sudden we got along great in the next scene, it wouldn't have made sense. So I guess that's what perpetuated it. But I was thinking, I remember during that, I was thinking it'd be one of those things where like whenever, if you're ever in like kind of a relationship and one person will do the first, like, I don't want to be out in the woods, and you're like, what? And you're just the peacekeeper over here.
Yeah.
But then they start feeling cool. They're like, okay, whatever. And then you're like, no, I don't want to do anything now. Like, you know what I mean? And that's what I was thinking during that scene. Like, okay, and I was walking away. But I thought about that after. I still think it was well acted and it looked realistic.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how my choices about my overall objective, how much that influences the choices of everyone else who acts around you.
Yeah.
And it taught me to be more careful about how you are manipulating the scene for other people. even though I think the end result was good, it's still
Yeah, I mean, but
you know.
yeah, but because it's so much of acting is listening, then
Mhm.
obviously, like, because you were the lead, like, obviously, like, and you had more crux of the lines and more, it is easier to fall kind of into that a little bit. Like, it wouldn't make sense for me to go against it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So, like, I think it ended up working out because I feel like where I could show more concern than, like, we were irritated, so it wouldn't make sense that that first scene, all of a sudden I would show too much concern. Like, I had
Right.
that little brief moment of concern, but for the most part, I was still irritated with you because we're still stuck in the woods, and, like, it was supposed to be a hike, not a camping. Not
Right. Yeah.
where I could show more concern then was when you did come back and we sat by the fire, which was like a brief little thing that I did add in there where, like, I just kind of like pushed your hair out of your face, for example.
Yeah.
So it's like showing like kind of like a moment of tenderness, a moment of trying
Yeah.
to kind of connect again.
Yeah. It's
Although
like we're still friends, but this
yeah,
whole situation sucks. Yeah.
this whole
Yeah.
situation sucks, but, like, I am actually genuinely concerned. Like, you seem really out of it. So, like, trying to incorporate those at other points where it seems much more true to the story, I guess.
Yeah. And that is kind of, it's funny, because if you watch, I love, oh my God, there's nothing I love more. I have friends that have relationships that are rough, and not terribly rough, but like funny rough. Like it's not going to work out, but it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
It's like a social experiment. But like, and you try
I
to give them
pictured that.
yeah, what? Yeah, I'm just sitting there with your popcorn, like sipping from my Coca-Cola every time they sometimes it's, you never want to see a really unhealthy relationship. But whenever you see like a moderately, like, you just know it's not going to work out,
Yeah.
it's an interesting social kind of
Yeah,
experiment
like, you
that
feel
they're,
like an anthropologist. Like,
yeah, like, interesting. Yes, I did. But I've witnessed people. I it's it's funny to watch people go through their arguments whenever they know that people are watching, but they don't care that people are watching. And there's which is good. It's a good thing. You know what I mean? That's actually not a bad quality. But um whenever you're watching people bicker, it tends to go like I said, that one person has an issue, and then the other person's like, "What?" They're just kind of defensive, but they're not
yeah,
like they're still kind of like, "Hey, let's just be peacekeepers." And then this person's like, "Hmm," and they go, "What?" And then eventually this person kind of gets over it after like 20 minutes of silence, and then they're like, peace," and they go, "Yeah, yeah, the peace." You know what I mean? And it's so consistent. Like almost every argument I've ever seen, it just, that's the rhythm that tends to play out.
yeah,
And it was actually really fun to play that out in that film in that way. And then also whenever they tend to kind of make up, it's not like, "Oh, that's okay." It's not like a cartoon where like, "Oh, it's okay, I love you," blah, blah, blah. And you can't just hug after like
yeah,
a 40-minute argument. It's like that little thing where they kind of like pass the remote, where
yeah,
they, you know what I mean? It's like these little these tiny gestures to getting back to good.
yeah.
And so yeah, that was a good addition, I think, because of that, that the little gestures trying to reacclaim um, your positions in relation to each other.
Yeah, and even I think the way he wrote it in the script with the handkerchief when, like, your nose is bleeding kind of thing, and I think originally I'm supposed to hand it to you, but, like, I went to actually go do it because, like, that's all of a sudden I'm the concerned girlfriend, so it was like, no, like, I would instinctually I would go to, like, like you would with a child, like you would go to, like, I want to fix it kind of thing. So
Yeah,
there's little subtle ways that you can go from being the nag to
yeah, yeah,
to actually showing that you have concern for the person. So
right. So yeah,
cool beans. Well, I
yeah,
definitely enjoyed catching up with you, and hope
yeah. Same here.
I was gonna say, like, we can totally do an improv one of these. We can totally do a you can sing for us, whatever you want. So
Woo!
we'll have
Yeah,
one. So
cool.
yeah, I'm gonna say bye on this. I'll at least stop recording, and then we can
Okay.
chat for a second. But do you have any last words?
Oh my God, I don't know why I almost quoted Danny Tanner. It's like, stay real, San Francisco. I can't remember what he says. No, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks a lot. No, this was fun. I want to do more of these. Even after quarantine, I'd like to do more Zoom meetings because driving an hour everywhere is getting old a little bit, especially for meetings and things like that. But I love seeing my friends that are an hour away. So I would love to see them more, but not have to drive quite as much unless we have a mission.
Yeah.
Just because, yeah, car issues and stuff like that. So we should do this more. It'll be good.
Cool. All right. Well, let me stop that.